life in 10 seconds.
Okay.
So I will describe you as an author and activist. Is that good?
Sure.
Yeah.
Living in Procida, living in Italy, but from Toledo, Ohio. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I've got the link, and I'm going to post it on my the Facebook. Then others can see.
And Mimi is our mutual connection. Eh?
Yes, we are live, Mike.
Oh, yes. Greetings.
Right. Okay, I just posted it. Good evening. Thank you for watching this FORSEA or Forces of Renewal Southeast Asia dialogue live series on democratic struggles. Although many of us are rooted in Southeast Asia, that we concern ourselves with the issues that confront different societies across the world, irrespective of nationalities, geographic locations, or economic class, what have you. So we see our world as one human race, suffering from the impact of the same sociological, economic, and ideological forces. And it's, the history is not about one big man or one big woman. It is about different forces and conflicting material and ideological interests, vying for power, wealth, strategic control of land and territories, as we saw in what happened in Ukraine. But this is not unique or exceptional to Putin's Russia. This has been done by different European colonial powers over the last 500 years. And so today, this evening, I have a very distinct honor and pleasure to have the Italian American, born in USA, but living in Naples, one of the islands. Michael
Procida. Procida.
Procida, and that he is an author, activist, and also self-exile in Italy. He left the United States after he got really disillusioned with what's happening there. And ironically, he finds himself in a situation where new forms of what he calls fascism is making a comeback since the end of World War II and the demise of, Mussolini. My guest today is Michael Leonardi. He has just published, just last week, a really insightful piece in the Counterpunch about the role the United States policies, foreign policies, have played in creating or setting the stage up for the Italian new fascism's comeback. And welcome, Michael.
Thank you so much, Danny. It's great to be here with you. Yes.
Yes. So we had exchanged notes over the months, and then most recently about the the need to call a spade. And there are people who, including Italian activists and intellectuals, who take issues with the use of the word fascism to describe Meloni's, the brothers of Italy, rising to power, right? And can you explain why you feel a need to call, far-right populism in Italy fascism? And that I think that we need to confront this definitional issue so that listeners and us can be on the same page, and then we can have a proper dialogue. So we are using words as commonly understood rather than talking past each other.
So let's just say that in Italy, fascism is against the Italian Constitution, right? So it's not considered to be accepted part of the political spectrum. However, Georgia Meloni, when she was a young woman at the age of 15, became a leader in the fascist youth movement in Rome, and has always been a proud fascist. The symbol of the Brotherhood of Italy political party is this tricolor, the three-color flame, which is a symbol of fascism that she refused to have taken away from the symbolhood of the Brotherhood of Italy political party. She's always been a proud fascist. She's always supported the politics of Mussolini, said he was a great politician that steered the country in a effective way. So she's never shied away from her fascist roots. And so Italians don't want to accept the fact that they've gotten to this point. So her political, now let's say you had a question mark, because is Italy it's heading towards fascism? Is it there yet? I wouldn't say so. I mean, we don't have hordes of fascists in the streets or anything like that. And if you look at the outcome of this election, the largest percentage went to non-voters. And this is a first in Italy that the lowest voter turnout, only 64% of the eligible voters voted. So really, Meloni, whose political party out of those 64% received 25%, but 26%, sorry, 26%. However, looking at the number of eligible voters, she really only got 15% of the, less than 15% of the eligible voters in Italy. Now, Italy's a parliamentary system. Always, they're trying to reform this parliamentary system to make it more like the United States, a kind of a bipolar two-party system, center-left, center-right, they call it, right? But this they call the extreme right, Meloni's party, but it's rooted in fascism. She comes from the fascist youth movement of Italy and rose up through the ranks, has never shied away from it. And many of her supporters consider themselves fascists. Now, her election to prime minister, which hasn't been made official yet. She has to be called by the current president, Mattarella, to form a government. And this is a process. They have to form the House and the Senate, and then they have to nominate her as prime minister. So it's a process, and it's taking a while, and there's a lot of tension going on, leaving the neoliberal Draghi government, which was a technocratic appointed government, which was a neoliberal wasteland, which just abandoned the working class, the growing struggling Italian population, just kind of abandoned them in a vacuum. Okay, so we're passing from this guy Mario Draghi's broad coalition government that had components of the extreme right, the Lega party, Matteo Salvini, who is a xenophobic, racist, anti-immigrant. He was a part of that government, and everything, this five-star populist movement that now they consider to be on the left, and the Democratic Party, which is modeled specifically after the Democratic Party in the United States. They left a vacuum, and the fascist movement filled that void. So she is in coalition. What allows her to become the prime minister is the fact that she's in coalition with Matteo Salvini's party, Lega, the xenophobic racist party, and still alive and maybe not so well. He's becoming more and more incoherent in his old age. Silvio Berlusconi and his political party, Forza Italia. So these three parties combined allowed her to have the majority, which is like 46% of the voting population, to allow her to become prime minister. So,
yeah, can you, I want to, stay with the fact that, essentially the prime minister elect, Meloni, has fascist youth background, right? And that this organization that she joined when she was 15, is widely recognized or known to be, fascist organization that drew inspiration from Mussolini's the fascist party, and consider one of the greatest criminals in the 20th century, a great leader, right? It speaks volume, and there are cases where the young politicians cut their teeth in these, like, rather anti-humanist and nefarious movements. Say, for instance, like in India, the current prime minister, Modi, he has been a lifelong member of the organization RSS that drew inspiration from the Nazi party in Germany before the Second World War, and the Modi remained faithful to the ideology that attracted him to be the member of that Hindu extremist fundamentalist the movement, that was founded 70 years ago or even older. And the Meloni's, like many far right the politicians, use the rather rigid understanding of what it means to be an Italian, Italian identity, like, the Marie Le Pen in France, there's like French identity, right? Then, like, you've got a new the Democrats party in Sweden that came second, that want to save the white Swedish natives from the dangerous brown, black, and non-Christian immigrants. So this
nativist,
whole
xenophobic,
nativist, yeah,
racist, all of these words which Steve Bannon has encouraged these people to wear as a badge of honor because they're winning,
right.
and they are winning.
Can you tease? I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you tease out these elements that the U.S. President Biden called extremists? He gave a national address saying that the greatest threat to the United States is not foreign, but internal. These extremist ideas, and alluding to January 6th and the Trump supporter, right?
There's that. Then you go to see Biden, and I feel like Biden is an extremist warmonger on another level. And so one of the issues that Italy is facing right now, economically, and there's a lot of economic disenfranchisement and frustration, and the fact that this so-called center left a complete vacuum of leadership, much like they always do in the United States, disillusioning the working class or the people that are feeling the brunt of the economic crisis most directly. They feel like there's nobody representing them. So that's why the majority, that 36% didn't vote. But so that's actually the majority party, is the non-voters, because they don't feel represented by any center left that doesn't stand for anything. They stand for neoliberal policies, pro-capitalist, pro-war. one of the things, Italy's constitution repudiates war and is for peace, okay? Peace was taken out of the language of the left parties. Nobody mentioned the word peace in this election campaign. Italy has been supplying weapons to the Ukraine during this war and doing the dictates of what the United States government and NATO tell it to do. Italy's a member of NATO, but we have to go back to the end of World War II, because that's when the situation becomes very complicated. Because when Mussolini was the leader of Italy, there was a major movement within Italy internally fighting against fascist rule, led by the communist partisans, the partigiani. And they were fighting tooth and nail, battling from village to village across the country against fascist rule. Then the United States and the Allied forces came in and are often credited with liberating Italy from fascist rule. But the communists in the history would tell a different story, that it was a combination. And we'll remember that Russia really defeated fascism and Nazism on the front there, right where in
Hi, Michael. Are you still there? Hello? I think my guest seems to have had internet problem from this island where he is living. Michael? Hello? Let's hope he reconnects. Michael, just bear with us for a second. Hello? I lost him. I think he'll come back. Just bear with me for a second. He's on this island off the coast of Naples in Italy. You're listening to Michael Leonardi, an activist and a writer who just published the role of the United States in creating conditions in which far-right Italian political parties could come to power. So anyway, like we got okay, you're muted. Michael, unmute, please.
Okay, I was really in there. Then all of a sudden blocked. Everything stopped. Excuse me. Sorry.
That's all right. I was keeping the dialogue, alive by filling in, saying that you are having somewhat difficult internet connections. And so carry on. Maybe like pick up where you started, just to make sure.
It says my internet connection is unstable, so hopefully this will work. Okay, you can hear me
on, please. Yeah.
So World War II. At the end of World War II, the most popular party in Italy was the Communist Party. For the United States, that Italy would become part of the Soviet bloc countries. Okay, the United States government spent $10 million to influence the first election after World War II to defeat the communists in Italy and put in a US friendly democratic Christian party that was really created under the guise of the CIA's influence to combat the communist popularity in Italy. So also, if you look at Italy, it's very strategically important for the control of Middle Eastern resources and right across the Mediterranean, from occupied Palestine, from Israel, from Egypt, from the oil-rich Middle East. So
Libya, Lebanon. all these
Libya,
places.
Lebanon. The war in Libya, the command and control center was in Italy. And there are US military bases throughout Italy and important satellite radar systems to control drone warfare in Sicily, nuclear weapons in the north of Italy that are US nuclear weapons. So Italy is like an occupied colony of the US empire at the beck and call of the United States. Now, what is this movement of these nationalists, sovereignists, xenophobic, fascist rooted in Italy, in Hungary, in Poland, in Spain, Sweden, across Europe, gaining popularity, groomed by Steve Bannon, right? I mean, there was an actual meeting of Meloni, Salvini, Bannon, and all these things with this. They wrap themselves in this Christian rhetoric, talking about families first and, you know, Italians first, right? This nationalist pride based on a populist rhetoric, right? That we're tired of the immigrants coming in and destroying our country. This kind of the same sort of rhetoric that is used by Trump. But then if you look at the immigration policy in the United States under Biden, very, very little has changed as far as the immigrant policy. There's still, it's as if the neoliberal elite, they tolerate the racism just as long as their economic policies can be pushed through, right? So Italy is facing an economic crisis. And then after the pandemic, okay, you have in the last year, energy prices have risen over 200%. So the cost of everything is on the rise. Wages are stagnant here, and it's the lowest wages in Western Europe, in Italy. And the wages have been stagnant for years. They can't push through a minimum wage. There is no minimum wage in Italy. I know people that worked for €4 an hour this summer. Whoa. Ridiculous. And then the immigrants that come into the country crossing the Mediterranean, usually over 2,000 drown at sea every summer, every year, trying to cross into Italy and Spain and other gateways into the rest of Europe. These immigrants are often working as slaves in the south of Italy, harvesting crops, not paid anything, just food and a tent to sleep in. So we actually have slave labor today in Italy, based on the using the immigrant population. So we have a big combination of issues that has allowed this fascist movement, I wouldn't say to sweep into power. It's not like they have a mandate from the population, but to kind of sneak in the door and now find themselves in a leadership position. Now, what does it mean? We have, I think we'll see more in the next couple weeks what's going to actually happen, because there's already indications that Meloni is going to, you know, broker deals with the Draghi, the Super Mario, the banker, this former president of the Central Bank of Europe, which is doing no favors to Italy or to the European country or to the working class people of Europe. So she's got to meet deadlines, financial deadlines, and so do these guys have the capacity to meet these deadlines without the support of the technocrats? That's yet to be seen. Right. And then the issue of the war in the Ukraine is a very frustrating issue because, in my opinion, Italy should be neutral, pushing for peace negotiations. And this is the way it should have been from the beginning. But instead, they're under the dictates of the United States when it comes to the war in the Ukraine. And I feel like Italy is in the middle of the Russian imperial moves, because surely Putin has imperialistic intentions, and the US imperial intentions, right? But when you look at the map of the world and you see the over 800 US military bases spread all over the world, we don't see that from Russia and China, right? So who is the most imperially aggressive on the world stage seems to be the United States.
Yeah, I think like we could draw parallels with the First and Second World Wars. You know, they were fought in the name of liberal mission, civilizing, or like democratizing or defending the freedoms, right? But all of that in the face of these European, enlightened powers. So they like to flatter themselves as like, the enlightened powers, right? Benign colonialists, the holding
Nani, can I interrupt?
billions of people as colonies or colonial subjects, and then say, come and fight against the fascists because we need to defend freedom and democracy. And so, the colonized subjects from Burma, India, Africa, wait a minute, like, you are holding us in colonial bondage, and you want us to go and defend freedom and democracy, right? But that's
That's
leave that aside. I want to return to what you're saying. You're saying that the economic hardships, right, that came about as a result of certain U.S. advocated policies, market first, private, profit above people's well-being, dismantling of welfare states, the siphoning of wealth upward, and creating oligarchical 1%. In the United States, you call them like billionaires, but in the Russian context, we call them oligarchs, right? They're the same people, like, right? Yeah. And so I do gardening, and I look at this issue from a gardener's perspective. There are seeds, different types of seeds that take root and thrive under certain climatic conditions and in certain soil. And the way I would translate it into my own gardener's perspective is that the conditions for the new seeds of fascism to take root across Europe, actually quite scary. Yeah. The climatic conditions, they came about as a result of certain economic ideologies, not economics as a study of economies, right? But economic ideology, right? And you remember Alan Greenspan, the former Reagan appointed chairman of the Federal Reserve, central bank in the U.S. in Washington. After several major banking crises, including subprime, mortgages and whatnot, he admitted that what the United States was promoting was really an economic ideology, right? And so what you were saying is that, when we say like neoliberal, it sounds like so leftist and even academic. But to translate that for the people who don't specialize in political economy
free
or
market
sociology,
before everything else.
exactly.
Global capitalism, concentrated wealth, trickle down economy above everything else. The only solution is capitalism on steroids to everything. And
right.
And Berlusconi helped implement that in Italy better than anyone historically. So the United States tolerated that. And, Bush and Berlusconi were great buddies, right? But there's a normalization of fascism that goes on, right? I mean, I compare, the normalization of Berlusconi, the normalization of Meloni, even, right, already in the Italian media, right? Just like the normalization of Bush, right? Bush was a fascist, and look, he's
Or at
normal.
least war criminal. Whatever
War
his
criminal.
ideology, he was a war
His,
criminal. I
his
mean,
grandfather,
the same way that Putin is criminal, right?
yeah, his grandfather, Prescott Bush, collaborated with Nazi Germany, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and now George Bush has been normalized. He's a good guy. Paints portraits in his retirement, and he's great friends with Michelle Obama, and they're all just a big happy family of ruling elite. Yeah. And to what ends? I mean, I as a gardener, as somebody that loves nature, we share this in common, and we know that the central issue for our survival as a species is ecological. Climate change, the breakdown of ecosystems around the world, mass extinction that we're living in, the plastification of our ocean. I mean, they find plastic in our blood now. These ecological crises that were being drawn before COVID, there was a movement that was growing and rising here and across the world, in Europe. And sure, I've been an eco activist and a Green Party person for decades, and you've been involved with these issues for decades. And so there was controversy around this Fridays for the Future movement. But here in Italy and in many parts of Europe, and I know firsthand in Italy, it was very anti-capitalist in nature also. So it was ecologically focused and anti-capitalist, and it was growing, and there were massive protests happening. And then COVID came, and then war for resources. And over the last year and a half, the energy companies, based on pure speculation, not on a shortage of gas, because there was no shortage maybe until this sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline that happened last week, but there was no shortage. Italy is still getting gas from Russia. They're still getting gas shipped from Odessa, from Russia, on tankers. They changed the name from a Russian tanker to a European one, and they still get the gas from Russia. They're still getting the gas. So there's not ever been a shortage of energy, but these companies have made record profits. In Italy, it's Eni and Enel that is half state and half private corporations, but all of them, Exxon, Mobil, Shell, all of these BP, they've been making record obscene profits like never seen before in the last year and a half. And now we have a resource war over resources that should be obsolete. Here in Italy.
Yeah. I mean, Professor Noam Chomsky, pointed out rather perceptively, the little common people like us, and people who, live hand to mouth, or like people who are less fortunate than us. They find themselves in these economically dire situations where economic survival becomes the number one priority, vis-a-vis, say, the health of the planet. We only have one planet. That's our habitat. The Native Americans call the earth a Mother Earth. The mining companies look at the earth as giant holes to drill, right? So it's like a radically different philosophical paradigms that these corporations and native people and the Generation Z look at the planet. But what Chomsky was saying was that the financial class, economic elites, who have absolutely nothing in common with common people, they rake in by the trillions in profit, like bonuses, obscene amount of wealth is pocketed individually, right? Not just as organizations. And yet, when people, millions or hundreds of millions of people find themselves in these very, very difficult economic situations, you've got like a religious right that comes in with the language of God, right? So like you mentioned Steve Bannon, the guy who aspired to be the very great communicator like Dr. Joseph Goebbels for Hitler. That's what Bannon aspired to be, although he found himself handcuffed and whisked away by the FBI. For Donald Trump, he was the chief architect of the Donald Trump's Make America ideology. Basically the American version of white fascism. Couched in the language of Christianity, and he was also connected with the Vatican, and I'm sure you know this. He and Italian fascists they team up and actually attempted to buy or borrow this ex-Catholic a monastery,
a big monastery.
Train. Yeah,
a big, beautiful monastery outside of Rome.
That's where they're going to train these young generations of like fascist ideologues from around the world.
Yeah.
And then so this is no joke, right?
One good thing about COVID is that was blocked. I mean, they no longer are renting this beautiful monastery in the foothills outside of Rome near a town called Frosinone. We were going to go and occupy it. We were going to go. There was some.
That was they had to shelve it because the provincial authorities or the council there, they blocked the rental arrangement, right? That was supposed to be they're pumping in millions.
He was paying €1 or something like that. Yeah,
they're not even expensive like fascists like Hermann Göring. Like Bannon seems like a really cheap fascist, despite the fact that he used to work for Goldman Sachs and attended Harvard Business School.
He and Meloni and Salvini, they all got together. This is the language that she used. As soon as she won, I start getting this. You see this video of her speaking at some Christian Crusades convention a couple of years ago about all of the language of Bannon. They are just trying to make us into, and it sounds to a degree, they make it sound good to appeal to the people, right? They just want to make us into the perfect consumer as a number. And they want to destroy our family, and they want to infect us with gay and lesbian and against the traditional family and all of this other kind of thing, and against our national identity, right? So this is the whole language that Bannon went around. And it's interesting to see, just before this evening, I was researching more about Bannon, and I found an article written in 2020 saying that Bannon's attempt to unify the right, these fascist elements across Europe with Orban and in Poland and Sweden and Vox in Spain is failing, but it's not failing. It hasn't failed. It's succeeding. We see that it's having success. I mean, it didn't fully arrive. Le Pen did very well in France. She didn't win.
Yeah. Well, she's waiting in the wing.
But France is in a vacuum. Led by this neoliberal Macron. And we remember the Yellow Vest protests were rage against the situation of economic disenfranchisement that was going on in France, which is still there under the surface, but it was clamped down during COVID, right?
Yeah, I mean, to make the central thesis of your article, which I fully agree, very clear. These what Biden called extremist ideas, like white nationalism, in the United States, that embraces the so-called great replacement theory. Yeah. The real Americans are, white Anglo-Saxon Western Europeans. They've been replaced by the Spanish speakers, Asians, and the Chicanas and Africans, other arrivals and whatnot, right? So when people like Bannon spread the idea of the defense of Christian civilization, right? And they even like wax this anti-capitalist language, right?
Mm.
But like you mentioned, like right after the Second World War, the United States kick in at the time $10 million. That's loads of money. We're talking about like 70 years ago. $10
Right,
million.
19, yeah, and we're talking about
They held
1947.
hundreds of millions. Yeah.
Yeah,
So like the God is
they want to
always
talk about
useful. No, see,
influence.
Michael, God is always useful. Religion is, like a Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. Well, that was, in part,
US.
supported by the CIA. And
Yeah,
we've got like extremists, like, Orthodox Buddhists in Burma. They received money from CIA back in 1950s, right? When the country, was still attracted to the idea of communalism or socialism. And then they were pumping these, like, they're Neanderthal Buddhist monks with the extremely conservative Orthodox ideas, like and God is, I mean, like, the rise of, fundamentalist Islam, political Islam has roots in the United States pumping, so that they could become the first
jihadists.
defense against communist and socialist and any type of humanistic ideologies, right? So when Bannon and Maloney and Marie Le Pen, when they talk about traditional Frenchness or like traditional Italians and identities and national, the national defense culturally and whatnot, they are actually using the old language of Hitler's cleansing. That the Aryans are being contaminated, right? You cannot have this racial contamination. That they are using it as a cultural, religious, and racial in a combination. But for Hitler, it was racial contamination that he was fighting, right? That ended up with Auschwitz and other places. So the new fascists that we are concerned about today, they are adapting the language, yeah, and then the mainstream media is euphemicizing, right, making it light by calling it far right. What exactly is far right? How far do you have to move to the right, for something to be called fascist? So can you elaborate on why we need to take Maloney's very dangerous far-right ideologies and why we should be concerned about, this platform being mainstream? For God's sake, they're like, within reach of, state power. As soon as like she's crowned, you've got
They're
Mussolini.
talking about, I mean, they're talking about her being the first prime minister to have a mandate for 5 years, which is the way it's supposed to be, to successfully have that mandate. What surprised me, yeah, the first time that she went to speak after she won the election, she kind of disappeared from the public view for about a week, okay, because of what? It was last week, right? What day is today? Is Monday. Yeah, it was last week that we were getting the election results. So it's been a week. And yesterday, I believe, was her first she went to have, they say she was received by Berlusconi at his mansion resort, right? Where he lives.
You mean like the Berlusconi, the molester, child molester?
The molester, the child, this woman. He appointed women to roles of power in his government. Really, I refer to Berlusconianism. He kind of destroyed the idea of having intellectuals or even well-prepared people in positions of power in government. he eliminated that. No longer is it necessary to have a university education to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs. The previous one that is about to leave off is named De Maio, who came out of this other 5-star kind of left populist movement in Italy. Doesn't even have a university degree. His previous job was selling beverages and snacks at the football stadium in Naples. And this guy all of a sudden rises out of nowhere and becomes the Minister of Foreign Affairs in the left, in the center left, the center right, everywhere, right? Compromising what values they supposedly had. This is another, I'm going off on a tangent. But Meloni's first public appearance was this weekend. So first she went to have coffee at Berlusconi. They say received, like he's the Pope of the right or something, you know, Pope Emeritus of the right is Berlusconi. After she had coffee with Berlusconi, she went to it's called Coldiretti, and it's the big organization that represents the agricultural producers of Italy, okay, which historically should be leaning more towards the left, you know, rooted. That was her first public appearance. She was introduced by a guy that said, you know, we are hoping that Italy returns with its pride to its history, that she has a mandate for 5 years. And she was received with open arms. They were waving the flags, not the Fratelli, but their yellow and green Coldiretti flags, as if she was a hero, right? And this was just yesterday. I thought, geez, Italy's really in trouble, right? I know friends on the left here, they, oh, no, Italy can't have, it's fascism is against the law in Italy. It's a violation of the Constitution to have a fascist government. Now, there's maybe 1 or 2 brave Italian journalists that are challenging the narrative, but they're not only challenging the narrative on the war in the Ukraine, which is that Italy is doing everything that the United States dictates, which is against its constitution too. They should be neutral. Sending weapons to the Ukraine is a violation of the peace repudiating war policy. They should be neutral, repudiating war, and pushing both the Russian imperialist and the US imperialist to say no to the war. Because there are a couple reporters that say this is not a war really anymore between the Ukraine and Russia, because if we look at also Biden's role in the 2014 coup in Ukraine, and
you mean like the Orange Revolution?
The Orange Revolution and all of this. So the US's hands are very dirty. So this is a war really now turning into a third world war already, possibly. You know, that's how it should be looked at. And that the United States and Russia are the ultimate players here. Zelensky, I don't trust the guy. And anyway, he's there buying up arms, and a whole lot of young people are being killed. And people,
but what do they say? Like, you know, I think it was Chomsky or someone else, who was, you know, talking about how the United States is going to fight this war until the last Ukrainian standing, right?
Yeah, that's it.
You know, I mean, like, you know, this guy Michael Leonardi, of whom I knew, he's a professor of politics at Stanford, and he was Obama's, you know, advisor on Russia, and appointed the Obama's ambassador to Moscow, you know, during the Obama's years. And he wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, and I was really shocked to read the op-ed, and particularly one line saying that no, we must keep on going. We must keep on supporting the Ukraine, and because after you know, nuclear tactical assault on Ukraine, Ukrainian would even doubled down on their resistance. And, the guy obviously had never set foot in Nagasaki or Hiroshima. There's no such thing as after nuclear assault.
They're normalizing nuclear war now.
Exactly. This is a Stanford professor and a former Obama ambassador to Russia saying that Ukrainians are going to fight on even after nuclear war attacked by the Russia. It's complete insanity. But Washington Post found it fit to print this kind of words of madness. So we've got another maybe like 7 minutes. So I want to return to a bit the more societal issue. Within the within the fascist countries from the Second World War, only Nazi Germany, after the total defeat in 1945, by both the Soviet Red Army and the Allied and the partisans, across Europe. I was in former Yugoslavic the republics. I've spent quite a bit of time there with my anti-fascist colleagues, and the partisan led by Tito was huge, right? And the West has portrayed itself, particularly the British. I live here in England. They like to flatter themselves that by telling themselves and others that they liberated the Europe, the continent, right, from the Nazi. They were early collaborators. Chamberlain, if you've heard of that guy's name, the friend of Hitler, and also British King Edward was also very, very buddy with that Adolf Hitler, no less, right? And so, but anyway, the point is that the post-war Germany, particularly West Germany, was forced to undergo denazification program. In history classes, I guess the starting middle school for about 5 or 6 continuous academic years, the young generation of post-war Germans were forced to learn Nazi atrocities, and basically they were created anti-Nazi Germans, right? Like very different from their parents or grandparents' generation, right? So Italy never had this process of denazification, defascification, and then the same goes for Spain, right? And France was also not innocent. France capitulated after 2 weeks of fighting, or maybe less than a month, and there were massive number of the French population that were anti-Semitic and that welcomed the Nazis, right? And the Scandinavia, the same thing. Under the neutrality pact, the Swedes were doing business with Hitler. Swiss banks are so well known for extracting gold teeth, from Nazi victims and depositing them. And then Finland, right? And then Norway in Quisling invited Hitler in, right? So you've got a massive European, massive number of the European regimes that actually, willingly collaborated with the Nazis, right? Back in the 1940s. And so these countries, particularly countries like Italy, which was the most important pioneering fascist country, Mussolini was in power, and he even inspired Hitler when Hitler was nobody. He was already a very powerful Italian leader, right? And so I was in Foley, just about 45 minutes, away from Florence, and Foley was one of the strongest holds of Mussolini. It's within his birth region, right? If you walk around downtown Foley, there are, so many fascist symbols, openly, right? I asked my Italian academic friends, and they pointed out to me these are fascist symbols. I was like, why do you keep them? Or at least have the label to use to explain the fascist. No, they're like, well, we're not like Germans. We're not so good at we're not perfectionists. We're not effective like Germans. So that's their language. Yeah. So therefore, we don't need to worry about, we never really the fascists fight the entire society. It seems like fascism and fascist strain of thought has never really
Never died.
died in
It's
Italy.
always
I
been there.
mean, you are living there. You've been there. Your father
It's
was
always been
Italian.
there.
Can you explain like what this kind of like the fascist strains like within this Italian body politics?
It's always been here. It's always been there. There's if you go into Rome, you see, go around Italy, you'll see fascist graffiti, you see communist graffiti, you see all across the board, right? But if you go in Rome, oh, that's a fascist high school, that's a communist high school, almost like football teams, right? And then the fans of the football teams identify also with the fascism or communism, right? It's ingrained into the society. And even though it's repudiated or against the official constitution, it's never been intentionally attempted to be there was never an attempt at defascification, like you say, right? That was never done. And some of the responses I've gotten from Italians is laughing about the fact that I say, fascism. Oh no, it's against the law. Fascism can't come back in Italy. It's not possible. So now we're just going to change the name, normalize it, and call it center right. And if the policies of xenophobia, putting a naval blockade against the immigrants that are desperately trying to get in, from war-torn countries, from policies of Europe, right? There's an interesting speech too from Meloni that somebody's, where she's
like she was attacking the golden boy of Europe, that banker come the president. What's his name? No, the guy in France, Macron, Emmanuel Macron. She was attacking them. Look, Europe is sucking Africa dry, and so because of the situation, they will come to the nearest shore across the
sounded like
Mediterranean.
France Fanon, right?
Yeah. Oh my God, I was like, well, this woman is so progressive until I realized that she was couching her language in a somewhat like acceptable mainstream language. And that's why there was an article in the Times of London saying that like Meloni isn't really far right, it's a traditional conservative values. But what people don't understand, it seems to me, is that the fascism always draws on radical conservative ideas of race, religion, civilization, culture. For them, everything is pure. I mean, conservatism is one of the stupidest human, invention. Put it that way, right? It is really scary when this kind of the thinking is being mainstream and made respectable. When you say conservative, it has this false tone of respectability, right? Someone can be conservative, but if you look at the Nazi Germany and the early rise of Nazism and Nazi Party, Hitler and his men drew on the feudalism, early capitalist German industrialists, militarists, the Prussian military, So if you look at the makeup of the pillars of German Nazism, German fascism under Hitler, you find feudalist elements, royal, obviously feudalist, royalist, Kaiser and all the all aristocracy was there, bankers, industrialists, right? And then like militaries. Well, when the war was going well for Hitler and the Nazis, they were the one who were reaping the economic benefits of fascism. This fascism was not simply about hating those who are different from you. It was is an extreme form of militaristic economic exploitation. I mean, speaking of concentration camps, they're nothing but forced labor. People were forced to work until they dropped dead. That's like a modern form of slavery. If you go to Auschwitz,
Italy
that's what.
has Italy has a modern form of slavery now. The migrants that come into the country and are often working in the fields, harvesting the crops in the south of Italy, like they do in U.S. They're at times working for no money, just a tent and food.
Yeah,
And
they
literally,
cannot run away either.
they can't-
Their travel documents and IDs were confiscated, right? I
right?
mean, you have that in
No idea.
Florida, in orange plantations, right? And like the migrants cannot run away because they're so vulnerable. I mean, so we've got that. So Italy has that right now.
Right now, yeah, right now, in the
Right.
south of Italy, right now, there's slavery going on. It's
So
documented.
they must be like picking grapes and others that go.
Picking tomatoes, picking grapes, picking, yeah, all the crops, right? Italy has got a very abundant agricultural system. So maybe that's why the agricultural production organization where she spoke first received her so well, right?
Right.
Because they know maybe she's going to supply them with the workers, but they're going to have absolutely no rights, right? And one of the things that concerns me when you talk about the militaristic aspect, right? The Forza di Ordine, what they call the Forza di Ordine, the police system in Italy is a huge apparatus. They have so many different kinds of police, carabinieri, polizia, the comune, different types of police, many employed, many part of this policing structure. And there's always within that structure been a tendency towards fascism. And we saw it rear its head clearly in Geneva at the protest of the G8 when Carlo Giuliani, remember the young Italian, was killed in that protest. And there were young people from all over the world that were beaten and tortured by the police forces of Italy that were in a school, okay, that were using the school as kind of a central headquarters for media, for international press, and they were just brutally beaten, pools of blood, tortured by the military and all different kinds of police forces that exist within Italy. So that fascist tendency has been within those police forces historically, never left. And so that, coupled with a fascist leader who also has the power to control the state media, which is very important in Italy, the state media. RAI, the national television and national radio, is listened to by a majority of people. The Italian people are forced to pay for it as part of their electric bill, right? They have to pay for it. And she's going to be in charge of this as well, right? So state media, police forces, military, it's a very bad combination. And so a lot of it seems like Italians just seem to like they're sleepwalking into fascism. And
Yeah, I mean, like, I mean, like you also, like, grew up in the United States, that the U.S. South, it's a apartheid system, so-called Jim Crow, during that period. The police and KKK, they just swap uniform during the day and night. You know what I mean?
still,
Like and the court system, and so, like, what you're saying is, like, this the Italy seems to, at least to me, have a fascist takeover, and now it's like quite over through the ballot box. And it wasn't even sneaking through the back door. That's why I think my argument is that when fascism comes, when it matures, and when it's confident enough, it comes through the front door. I mean, the same way the
Trump.
United States extremism came through the Oval Office, during Trump period. And so I'll give you the last word. Shall we be concerned about the resurgence of fascism in the form of Brothers for Italy? Can it become a rallying point for other European, the far right or like new fascist movements?
First person to call Meloni on election night to give her congratulations was Orban from Hungary. The second person was, and I don't even, Poland.
Whoa.
Yes, Poland. So, and then of course Spain, the Vox movement and everything. Is it a rallying cry? Is she going to be able to govern? Will the United States allow her to govern? I mean, there's questions that will be cleared up in the next couple weeks. It's too early to tell. And it's too early to tell which direction they're going to go. I mean, the pundits, right? The political pundits, they would like to pretend that she cannot go to the extreme right. She cannot implement truly fascist policies. That's what they want to believe. Now, her supporters and her inner circle have a different idea. And I've seen them on talk shows and things like that. I've been following the news here, and they seem to think it's, that you guys might think we're not going to follow through with what we say, but we are going to follow through with what we say, and you'll see, right? And they think, we have, do they have a broad mandate from the Italian people? No, they don't. But
do they really, do fascist regimes really have a universal mandate from the populace? Usually, once you capture like courts and a military and state propaganda organs, like different media outlets, the churches and whatnot, community organizations, you can drag the population in any direction you want, right? And
the Italian population, what's alarming to me, and I left Italy in 2011, and then I came back in 2017. And in that period, I saw a major degradation of culture here, and especially influenced by the media, the mass media, which that's part of that concept of Berlusconiism, right? He was a media mogul, and he had control of the media and the state media through his leadership. And there was just a degradation of the quality of information that was getting to the people. And the people just became like, the news became like a form of entertainment, right? Which I see always in the United States. And I see the United States as kind of the biggest extremist threat on earth. And in our current world today, I see the United States empire as the most existential threat to humanity. The only country that's ever used nuclear weapons, right? Right, yeah. And that still has a massive nuclear arsenal, right? That it's all investing more in its military than how the rest of the world combined, right? Including China and Russia, right? So I see the United States as the biggest existential threat. And I see the media in the United States, which I used to think in 2011, even with Berlusconi, the Italian media is so much better. In the 7-year period, I saw a big degradation in that, right? And so I just see like that possibility of the population being manipulated, right? I see that threat as real. I see it as real. Yeah.
But what you were saying is that pundits and the chattering classes are making light of the the danger pregnant in the rise of these so-called far right, but in our language, of fascist parties, right? I mean, like, the Rome is going to be in the hands of Brotherhood of so Brothers of Italy, and then, like, in France, Le Pen is just simply waiting for the next election cycle. Like, so, Macron cannot run again, and there's nobody else that could challenge Le Pen. And then the same in Sweden, Stockholm. This Swedish Democrats Party. Uh, is the second largest. I mean, Sweden, we like to think as a social democratic havens, right?
Yeah.
Tolerant and multicultural, all this stuff. And all of a sudden, man, that was like, there are different countries being captured or being influenced by these, like, extremely dangerous right-wing ideologies. And so,
It's
yeah, well,
it's I'm not optimistic. And I saw you say a couple days ago, you smile and you're happy and you're going to be happy in this life. And that's what we have to do, right? We have children. And so let's be happy, but I'm not optimistic for our future. I think we need to fight. I think we need to spread our information. I think we need to continue to dialogue like this. But I have a pretty pessimistic view of humanity and our future. Sometimes I wonder, what is humans are like some kind of mutant species. I mean, what could motivate humans in this direction to be such a destructive, negative force on a beautiful planet, right? Mother Earth, yeah? I mean,
yeah, we are the only species that would kill and that would destroy, for purposes other than minimum survival. Right? So, but because you're in Italy, like, we could end with the Gramscian note, the pessimism of the intellect, or the dialogue. Dialogue and rational discussion. So of course, like, we would feel dejected and we would not feel optimistic because there is no empirical ground for being optimist. But at the same time, we've got children, we've got friends, we've got concern for greater fellow humans, whoever they are, wherever they are. And so keep up the fight, the pessimism of the intellect, but optimism of the heart. And so on that note, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. It must be 10
wonderful
o'clock.
to meet you, and look forward to continued dialogue in the future.
Yeah,
Okay.
we could definitely, like, co-author pieces, and we need to
Great.
keep sounding alarm and organized. Yeah,
Yes.
thank you so much, Michael. You've been listening to Michael Leonardi, the speaking from
Let's do
Italy.
something, with Burma and Myanmar also, the situation there, because it's all internationally linked, and there often
Yes,
seems to be a big disconnect between
the same forces, the same players that
yeah,
are destroying all of us. They are everywhere,
yeah.
And so, yeah, have a great night, Michael.